Tonight we got a speaker that I have a lot of respect for and appreciation for. Not only does he lead the way in recovery, but he lives this and he lives it by example. So without further ado, my friend, my sponsor, Jay Dow.
Jay Dow, alcoholic drug addict.
Jay Dow.
My sobriety date is February 15th, 2012, so I'm sober a little over 7.5 years. I was talking to my sponsor today. I call my sponsor Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He lives in Prescott, because we lived in Prescott a few years ago, and I picked up my sponsor when I was about 5 years sober. Hadn't had a sponsor in over 2 years when I got my sponsor, so around 3 years sober, I had a falling out with my sponsor, and didn't really see the need to get another one. I was 3 years sober, I have a beautiful wife, my beautiful life, and sponsees and service commitments and all these things. And we bought a house, second house in Prescott, because we thought we were going to move up there and retire. And I met my sponsor when I was about 5 years sober. And he said, you need to have a sponsor in the same town that you live in. You need to have a sponsor that you see face to face a couple of times a week. And so, I asked him to be my sponsor. And I don't know, we were there maybe 3 months when we moved back after I got him. Moved back to Phoenix and, just stopped calling him, And so I've been back with my sponsor officially 3 months. I'd say 3 months, maybe a little longer. And so this time when I called him and said, hey man, I still want you to be my sponsor, he said, I'm going to hold you accountable to that this time, Jay. I want you to call me Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that's what I do. And I am deeply grateful that I am doing that. Like I just got a rush where I almost started crying. Because I can see how deadly that was for me to run around here for 2 years without a sponsor. I can see that now. I've had the unfortunate experience of 2 sponsees dying this year. I got another one that's probably going to die, but I hope not. And my sponsor relapsed at 20 years and 2 months sober. He's sober in June. He picked up 14 years of sobriety. But my sponsor at 20 years and 2 months sober, he's a biker, was at a biker concert, and he tells the story so well of being in a beer tent, and his biker buddy brought him over an O'Doul's because all his biker buddies knew he didn't drink. They knew he hadn't drank in 20 years and 2 months. And his buddy brought him over an O'Doul's, and my sponsor said to his biker friend, if you're going to do that, bring the real thing. And about 15 minutes later, his biker buddy brought him a real thing, which is a real beer. And at 20 years and 2 months sober, my sponsor got blasted and drove his motorcycle home drunk in the rain. And it was a year of him waking up on the floor in his own puke and a pistol in his mouth every morning. He's a retired truck driver, and he had a bunch of money in the bank, and it was just a year of trying to get back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said he would drive his motor, stay sober enough. About a year of that, he'd stay sober enough to drive to a meeting, drunk, but he did that for about 3 months. Stayed away from everybody in the program and all that, and finally he got a sponsor again and went through the steps again, and now he's sober 14 years. And so he is one of the wisest people I've ever met in my life. And so we have these deep spiritual talks, and we joke around a lot too. Like we joke around probably more than we talk about depth and weight. I mean, my life's awesome, but I'm alcoholic. And what that means is I don't always live in reality. I spend too much time in this reality up here in my mind, which is a lot different than this reality. And so I don't know, we were talking not long ago, I was telling him, we were talking about my 2 sponsees that have died this year. One guy's 27 years old, I sponsored him for about 4 years. The other guy was 33 years old, sponsored him for about a year. And he told me the story about when he had 2 sponsees die in a week. And I said, man, I relapsed for 5 years. So I'm sober 7.5 years, but I relapsed for 5 years. So if you're new to recovery or you're used, welcome and welcome back. We restore destroyed lives around here. That's all we do, man. We restore destroyed lives around here. And we do it out of this book. The book Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a book about drug addiction. The drug alcohol and every other drug known to man. This book works on the drug alcohol, every drug known to man, and every drug not yet known to man. This is the fix. And so, if you're in this program because your PO sent you here and you don't want to be here, you're here because the judge sent you here and you don't want to be here, that's okay, man. That's a great thing about recovery. Recovery met me where I was at, which was a homeless drunk. I heard somebody say one time, only a homeless drunk or drug addict can lay broken in the gutter and look down upon the world. And when I heard that, I thought, man, that is me. But not today, not for 7.5 years. So, today when I was talking about my sponsor, I was talking about a new sponsee I just picked up the other day. And I said, he's 60, and I was pitching my case, because I was trying to get him on my side of the story. And because I'm alcoholic, did I mention that? Yeah. All right. So I said, he's 60 days sober, and I'm 7.5 days sober, and then blah, 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 blah. And he goes, did you just say you're 7.5 years sober? I go, yeah, 7.5 years sober. He goes, oh, that's cute. You still use half years? I was like, well, all right, 7 years sober. He's like, I'm just kidding you. I got to keep you honest. So, anyways, that's my sponsor. He'll be down here in the fall, and we'll have him over here to speak. I have deep respect for him. But anyways, back to that conversation, we were talking about sponsees that died. I said to him, man, when I finally got sober, I did everything my sponsor told me to do. I remember one time, I'm a musician. Actually, I do music therapy here. I'll be here this Sunday, 2 o'clock, doing the music thing. And so I remember I got sober at Crossroads East for men. I was 6 months sober when I moved out of there finally. But anyways, I remember one time, I was probably about 3-4 months sober, and my sponsor was speaking. A different sponsor was speaking that night, and he showed up, and I was getting ready to go over to this acoustic coffee house and play guitar. And my sponsor showed up and said, hey, come on, jump in the car, let's go. I'm speaking. And I said, no, man, I'm going to go play guitar tonight. And he looked at me like I just spit in his face. And he said, you're not playing guitar, brother. I'm speaking. You're coming with me. Put that guitar back in your sober living room and let's go. And it's one of those moments where I could have went like this. Thought about it, but I didn't. And that's one of those moments that saved my life. Because he was telling me to do something that I didn't want to do. But I guess I was willing, because people do what they unconsciously believe about themselves. So I went and heard him speak that night. And I knew that was a turning point for me. Even that night when he's speaking, and I was thinking about, man, I'm here. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to go play music. And that's one of those moments, like, that got me sober. And I don't know, man. This recovery thing confused me for many years. I was atheist when I got here. I moved into sober living in 2007 for the first time. 2007, that's 12 and a half years ago. Big shot real estate broker I was. I moved into sober living. I was getting drunk 3 times a day. I wake up, get drunk in the morning, take a nap, walk up to the bar by my house, get drunk, go home, take a nap, and then go out that night. And I was getting drunk 3 times a day, coke and meth and all the other accoutrements that go along with that kind of lifestyle. So I woke up one day and I didn't have anything left to pawn, and I had no money, and I did what every alcoholic and drug addict does when they're completely and utterly out of options. Called my mom crying. And she took me to Crossroads East. I didn't know anything about AA. I was atheist. Didn't know, didn't care. Couldn't care less about getting sober. I just needed a place to dry out for a minute. And whatever, I came in. It was a 90-day program. And I got in a fight with the coordinator a week before the graduation. And got drunk that first. Within a few days of moving out of sober living, I was drinking again. And so I just did that for 5 years. I never thought I belonged in recovery. I played in a pro rock band through my 20s and till I was almost 30. Played with a bunch of famous people, played in front of crowds of thousands, was on the radio, prime time, drive time here in Phoenix, Friday. And music didn't work out, and at 29 years old, I was living with a dancer in North Carolina. She wasn't dancing in the ballet, but and I woke up hungover as could be one day and said, I'm going to change my life. And I went to the community college, and it was the last day to sign up for classes. And I said, I want to sign up for the real estate class. And so I did. I signed up for the real estate class, and I went to real estate school at community college, hungover every day at 29 years old, and I passed the class. And then I sat and took a 4.5-hour state real estate test and passed that. I couldn't believe I passed that thing. I got a real estate license and started selling land. And at 30 years old, I started making my own money for the first time. And I didn't know it at the time, but I know it's standing here today. I just put my real estate broker's license on inactive status a couple months ago because, I'm retired now. My wife, who's completely and utterly out of my league, did very well in business and in success. She's in the program too. She's in Eating Disorders Anonymous. They identify as addicts. And anorexics, actually, of all the diseases, have the highest mortality rate, the highest death rate per capita. Anyways, I just put my broker's license on inactive status a couple months ago. And I don't know, my whole life service today, which is really weird. Like all this equipment that I got here tonight, these cameras and this PA and stuff. I didn't show up to recovery with this stuff. It's disturbing to think what I would have done had I come up on a lick like this when I was homeless. But anyways, First time I ever got drunk, let me back that up. First time I ever smoked pot, I was in 6th grade. So like 11 years old, 12. I'm a hillbilly from southern Illinois, a little farm town, 5,000 people in Illinois. Pillbilly from Illinois. We moved out here, I think when I was about 11-year-old kid. Me and my mom and sister, my folks divorced when I was 7. And I came from a town of 5,000 people as a little kid, and we moved over to 28th Avenue and northern area by barbecues. And man, I was so scared when we got here. Went to school, and I had this hillbilly little southern accent, and it was different than everybody else. And like, this place was just so big, and I was so scared. And within 6 months of us living here, I smoked my first joint. And it's so weird to look back and look like, man, I was just stressed out as a kid. And pot made it okay. And so that was 6th grade. The first time I ever got officially drunk with a friend was next year, 7th grade. And I started running with the bad crowd. And ironically, my mom was a sergeant in Department of Corrections, DOC. And so, of all my friends, I was the only guy that wouldn't go home drunk or high. So I fixed that problem by being gone every weekend. And I had some family friends that were older than me that I could get drunk and high with. And that's what I did all through the end of middle school and high school. That's what I did, man. The weekend, Friday came, and somebody picked me up from school, and I was gone, and I come home Sunday night. And it was just, weekend of drinking and doing coke and all this stuff. And my mom, I think, probably knew, and just didn't want to deal with it. I mean, she's a single mother with 2 kids. We didn't have internet or phone. We didn't even have a house phone, and my mom was working nights, and I don't know, my heart goes out to her. She saved my life. My mom was the only person I couldn't drink and drug out of my life. I mean, she wouldn't let me live with her. I ended up being homeless for 3 years because my mom wouldn't let me live with her. Because they had background checks in her apartment. And I got, some background issues. And but she'd show up, man, and I'd get out of community bridges. I'd be homeless, and call her up, and she'd show up in the parking lot of community bridges with a bag of Jack in the Box food and $10, and I'd grab it and say, "I'm not going to get drunk." She would know that I was going to, but whatever. And I understand now, why my mom enabled me at the level that she did. She was afraid I was going to die. She didn't know what else to do. So I don't fault her for that. I'm her only son. But I got sober in 30 days. After 5 years of relapsing, I've been to jail 5 times, homeless for 3 years. In 2012, I checked into Maverick House, which is the state rehab. Community Bridges, CBI, knew me on a first-name basis. I was in and out of that place for 5 years. I never made it back into the detox. I just come in, come to, and be back in the, once they take you in the back, you can't get out until you blow zeros sober. And it's just, who's all been down there? All right. Not many hands. I feel like I'm back in there. And that was the deal. In and out of that place, in and out of that place. And so 2011, I was living in a shed behind a guy's house on a horse property, a dude I knew from AA, a relapser. And so anyways, I was drinking up all their mouthwash and getting money where I could, getting drunk, and I'd come back to the farm or his place and cuss his wife out drunk, and he'd kick me off the property for a couple of days, and I'd come back, and we did that for a couple of months. And I knew a dude from AA, and I ran into him, and he lived, I don't know, 3-4 miles from the shed that I was living in, and he'd come pick me up, and we'd go over to his house and just kind of do normal guy stuff. I mean, he knew I was homeless, but he thought I was sober. And, he'd just make dinner. We'd watch a movie. He was letting me use his computer to try to find a job. He had been in real estate years ago with his father. And, I had my real estate broker's license. I didn't have a car or driver's license. But anyways, we had the connection through real estate and recovery. And I remember one time he came and picked me up from the shed. I hadn't driven a car in 3 years. And he had a real nice Audi. And he come back to the shed and got me, and we're walking out to get in. I was getting in the passenger seat of his car. It was about 6 months before I got sober, and about 3 months before I robbed him. And we're walking to the car. I'm getting ready to get in the passenger side. He goes, "Hey," and I go, "What?" And he throws the keys to me. I caught him. He goes, "You're driving." I go, "Dude, I don't, you know what I mean? I'm already in enough trouble. I don't have a driver's license." He's like, "Drive this car." I hadn't driven in 3 years. And I got in the car. Homeless, living in the shed, and started driving down the road. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt human. I had not felt human in so long. I hadn't had a bank account in so many years. I couldn't keep a cell phone. And I didn't know it at the time, but I mean, everything is like they say, hindsight is 20/20, and what that means is I go through some suffering and loss, some trials and tribulations. I go through a hot mess, and I get on the other side of it, and I can look back and see clearly what was going on. And when he wouldn't take no for an answer, let me drive his car. A really nice car. It was an Audi. He gave me the experience of I am human. I can possibly someday get a car again. Can possibly someday get a legal driver's license again. The courts had me wrapped up. You need to get a car. You need to get a breathalyzer. You need to get an SR22. And when you're a homeless man, that stuff might as well be on Mars. Especially when you can't stop drinking. But because I took the action of driving the car that day, I was broken, man. Living in the shed was not as nice as his car. And because I took the action of driving the car, I got the experience of driving the car. And I got sober about 6 months later. 3 months later, I robbed him. We were, he gave me a key to the guy Richard Dennis is my buddy's name. And he called me this week. I owe him a phone call. But he gave me a key to his condo. And I don't know, I probably had the key 2 weeks. I didn't have a cell phone. And like I'd go over to his house for a couple of nights and hang out with him and just be normal, no drinking, no none of that. And then I'd go back to the shed and drink. And I kept my two buddies separated because that's what alcoholics and drug addicts do, so nobody can piece together what's really going on. But he gave me a key to his place, and I had the key about 2 weeks, and he said, whatever, just come over when you want to come over and let yourself in, sleep in the spare bedroom, you're good, bro. And that's what I did for 2 weeks. And he come home one day, and he said, I was over there, and he said, I got to go to California for 3 days, split, and just stay here and watch the place. You're doing great, just keep looking for your job, whatever. I don't even think he said don't drink. He might have, but probably didn't hear him. Anyways, he left, and I started drinking. And I drank for 3 days, and he came back, and as soon as he walked in his condo, he knew that I had been drinking. I was passed out on the couch downstairs right by the front door. And, stuff's broken. I can't even imagine what the kitchen looked like for me being drunk, cooking up everything in the house. And there's blood. And I'm the real deal, man. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict of the hopeless variety. And so he walked in and he woke me up and he said, hey, dude, give me my key and get out of here. You're not going to die in my house. And so I grabbed my backpack. And as the hand hit the door of me leaving and being homeless, I came up with my plan. And I walked straight over to Food City. This is up at the square, 32nd Street and Greenway area. I went to Food City and I bought a big bag of like Four Locos and Steel Reserve beers. And I went to the park and I started pounding them, waiting on him to go to work. And I knew what time he went to work, about 8 o'clock in the morning or something. And so he split for work. The car was gone. I was drunk, and I jumped his fence. And I took a rock about this big, and I smashed his patio door, and I robbed his house. This is the guy that let me drive his car. This is how I treated people who tried to help me when I was lost in addiction. And I took a laptop and some other things, and I walked out his front door. And I did have a cell phone because about 5:30, 6 o'clock, the text messages started rolling in and the phone calls about how he's going to kill me and how he's looking for me and all these things. And he knows that I robbed him. He was on federal probation, and I knew who his drug dealer was. And I let a bunch of the messages come through. And then I said, if you text or call me one more time, I'm going straight to your PO and telling her that you're getting high and who your drug dealer is. Because before sobriety, I just needed one secret on you until I used it on you. And that's what I did with Richard Dennis. And so he kicked me out. I was homeless for a week. I went over to the shed, talked to my buddy, told him I had the backpack, had a laptop in the backpack, and I went over to my buddy at the horse property, and I said, I just robbed Richard Dennis. Here's the computer. Please stash it somewhere. I don't really know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go to prison. I know that. I've been to jail 5 times, and now I got B&E. And it was like I don't remember the conversation. It was kind of one of those things where my buddy at the horse property, he just kind of gave me a hug. He said he loved me. And I just walked to the store and got some vodka. And anyways, I ran into a homeless crystal meth buddy of mine. And he was living behind this veterinarian hospital. And so I moved in with him behind the veterinarian hospital, homeless. And we were smoking meth, and I was drinking for a couple of days or whatever, and he called Comtrams on me. That's how I was getting loaded in the end. I was so out of control, drunk and high, that a homeless crystal meth addict calls Community Bridges on me. And the van shows up. Winning. And the only really thing I remember about that night was I remember the van door of the Community Bridges van, CBI van's open. We're all in the parking lot of Walgreens somehow. And my buddy's got his arm around my shoulder, you know, and he's looking at me. And the two people that worked for Community Bridges had a look of terror on their face. They were just kind of like, couldn't really believe what was going on. And I just remember my buddy, my homeless crystal meth buddy, saying, "Jay, you got to get in the van. You're going to die, bro." I said, "Man, I just want to die. That's it. I'm done." And anyways, I got in the van, and I just remember like driving back to Community Bridges. I was just laying on the floor, and like all the street lights are going the whole way. Just going, man, I didn't plan my life to be like this. And I got into Community Bridges, and actually, if you've been down there, they put you back in the bullpen to try to sober you up, and they came and did vitals on me, and the nurse came back and gave me 2 Valium, which had never happened. So I know I was in bad shape. And I got into the detox, and I sobered up. I'd been there a couple of days, and I made February 15th, 2012 my sobriety date. Valentine's wasn't that good that year, apparently. And so they offered to send me to Maverick House, which is the state rehab, and in realizing what I had done in robbing Richard Dennis, I got real motivated. They said, "Hey, you want to go to Maverick House?" I said, "Love to go to Maverick House." "Rehab, third one?" "Yeah, love to go over there. Thank you. Let's do this." And so I got real serious about not going to prison. And so I moved into Maverick House, the state rehab, with zero intentions of staying sober. I just moved in there to get the 30-day sobriety certificate. That's the thing about us alcoholics and drug addicts. I can get through anything as long as I know when's it over. Right? Jail, month and a half, prison, Salvation Army program. As long as I know when's the end, I'll get there. And so that was the plan. I figured, let me run in the state rehab, get the 30-day sobriety certificate, get in front of the judge for robbing Richard Dennis, and show the judge that I'm changing my life and hopefully get probation. And so I moved into Maverick House with this actual book. When I was living in the shed, my buddy's wife gave me this book. I moved into Maverick House with this book, which was actually a stage prop back then, and a suitcase full of donated clothes from Crossroads. And I went in there putting on what they call a dog and pony show. And I'm sharing in the groups. I'm walking around all over the rehab with this book and bringing it to group. And I'm sharing and I'm quoting the book in rehab. And my plan was 2012. I went into the state rehab going for the National Rehab Man of the Year award in 2012. So my therapist, all the therapists that work at Maverick House, the director, and everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous and Crystal Meth Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous in Phoenix, Arizona would see how serious I was, and we'd all load up and go down to the courthouse and keep me out of prison. And so when I was in the state rehab, I did something with this big book I hadn't done in 5 years. Read it. And my plan was so brilliant. I actually went through this book. My sponsor didn't tell me to do this. Nobody told me to do this. It was my plan. And I highlighted this entire book. Like, it took me almost 30 days in the state rehab of free time, because like in there, you do morning group and process group, and then you do lunch, and then like there's a couple hours of free time where you can take a nap and look for your rehab girlfriend and you know, smoke and joke and screw around. And like during free time, I was in my room highlighting this book, cover to cover. Like there's a lot of different color highlights in this book, like different colors, but these yellow ones run through this entire book. This is in 2012. February and March of 2012, when I was in Maverick House, I highlighted this book cover to cover with these yellow highlights. Not to get sober and not to read about God. I was atheist back then. The only reason why I highlighted this book is so when it came out in 30 days, everybody would see how serious I was, and they'd write me letters and go to court with me for robbing my buddy. But I was honest in highlighting my life story. So if you just take this whole book and read all the yellow highlights, it will tell you my life story. What I was like, what happened to me, and what I've been like for 7.5 years in sobriety. That's what this book is. It's the collective story of the first 100 alcoholics and drug addicts who went through the steps in the 1930s. It's the story of what they were like, what happened to them, and what they were like afterwards, having a spiritual awakening, which I've had. And so I was honest in my experience because I knew my sponsor would call me on it. And so I didn't just go through this book and okay, well, there's God. Let me highlight that. And they're always talking about helping people. Let me highlight that. Like, I literally read the whole book and highlighted my life story. Like, if I came across something that had happened to me, something I thought or felt, I hit it. Because I knew my sponsor would know. And if my sponsor knew I was lying, the gig was up. And so, like, I just randomly opened this page to 556, highlighted on here. It says, soon my drinking was as bad as soon my drinking was as bad as ever, all day long, every day. That's on page 556, this line right here. That made a lot of sense to me in 2012 because it was my life. The next page I highlighted, page 557. But now all choice was gone. I had to drink. Anybody else? And that's the cool thing about this book, man. Like, I sponsor more heroin addicts than any type crystal meth or alcohol. Like, I may be the last true alcoholic on the planet, I think. Next to my sponsor, he's alcoholic. But, like, I sponsor more heroin addicts than anybody. I've never done heroin. But the reason why I can sponsor a heroin addict is because it's the same experience. Ultimately, heroin does for my sponsees the same thing alcohol and cocaine does for me. It always ends up feeling the same and tasting the same. It tastes like blood, and it feels like shame. And so the brilliance about this program and this book is you can take the word, but now all choice was gone, I had to drink, and say, but now all choice was gone, I had to shoot heroin, or smoke heroin, or smoke meth, or shoot meth, or just drop in the word. That's the cool thing about this book. It's a book about drug addiction. And so, when they wrote this book in this program had been going 4 years. It started in 1935. Bill Wilson was 6 months sober when he 12-stepped Dr. Bob. And that's when the program officially started in 1935. And so for 4 years, they're sponsoring. There's 2 meetings going on, one in New York, one in Akron. They're sponsoring all these people. The whole program's come together. And 4 years later, in 1939, they published this book. They made 5,000 copies of it. And what they thought when they took the book is they could just mail it out, and an alcoholic or drug addict could just get this book at home and read it and go to his pastor of his church, clergy, that can't tell the cops, his 5th step. And you go to clergy and you get free of your 4th step with your clergy. And that's the way the book's written. Like they thought you could just read it and recover on your own. But what they discovered is sponsoring another man is what keeps me sober. That's what kept them sober. Sponsorship, which isn't in the first 164 pages of this book. They don't even mention the word sponsorship. The closest thing they mention about sponsor is a closed-mouth understanding friend, which is what a sponsor is, a closed-mouth understanding friend. And so in highlighting this book, for me, I was exposed to so much of the truth about myself that this book actually worked for me the way they initially wrote it. I mean, I'd been in the program for 5 years, but I found my life experience in this book, and I got exposed to the truth and the message out of this book. There's only one message in this huge book. There's only one message at the Salvation Army program. There's only one message in me speaking tonight. There's only one message at church. There's only one message from every spiritual teaching on this planet. There's only one message doing 12-step work with your sponsor. There's only one message around here. In recovery, we are standing around the newcomer and we're standing around the relapser with this message. Wake up. There's nothing wrong with you. Wake up, bro. There's nothing wrong with you. It's okay. You are in delusion. So was I. That's how we all get here. The definition of delusion is I'm lying to myself, which means I'm lying to you, but I don't know that I'm lying. That's why it is so impossible to get an alcoholic or a drug addict sober. Because you are a leader. You're not a follower, you're a leader. But a leader in delusion, or when I was in delusion, I called myself and everyone around me to the lowest and worst, especially my two mothers. I called myself and everyone around me to the lowest and worst. I brought out the worst in people, especially the people that knew my middle name. But I started running around with sober men, my sponsor, his friends, people in the program, staff members. I started running around with healed men, and they healed me. That's why this program works with a sponsor. Healed people heal people. Literally. Healed people heal people. That's why the courts send us to programs like this when we don't want to be here. Because as flawed as the judicial system may be, they know one thing. They know this works on alcoholics and drug addicts. They know this heals alcoholics and drug addicts. That's why they send us to programs like this. And so I was in the state rehab. I was a week from graduating. I was in there with my big book and I'm quoting and I'm trying to get everyone to write me letters. I finished highlighting this book. I'm a week from graduating and my mom died. My stepmom of 32 years. I hadn't talked to her in over a year since she kicked me out of her house. Her and my dad kicked me out of the house a year earlier in Illinois. Put me on a one-way plane from St. Louis, Illinois, or St. Louis, Missouri, to Phoenix, Arizona with nowhere to live. My dad gave me $200 at the airport. He said, "Be careful with that, Jay," and he got in the car. And I was standing there with my mom and crying. "I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me. I love you." She said, "I love you too," and she got in the car. And I was just kind of standing there like I'm standing here right now at the airport, out in the parking lot, the departures area with my suitcase and the $200 my dad just gave me, and my folks go to drive off. And the last thing I yelled to my mother was this: And I went straight to the bar and started drinking on that $200. And I came back out to Phoenix and was running the streets for a little while. And the next year I'm in rehab, Maverick House, a week from graduating, getting my certificate, getting everybody's letters. And my dad called me and said, Mom's on a respirator and we're pulling it today. She's not going to make it. So I called my sponsor. And I had the same sponsor for 5 years of relapsing. And I was crying. My mom was my best friend until I could no longer be a friend. And so I hung up with a rehab phone and I called my sponsor. I said, hey dude, my dad just called me. My mom's going to die today. I need to call my mom and make amends to her before she dies. Like they're going to pull the plug. Like, how do you do that? I need your help. And my sponsor said the words that saved my life 7.5 years ago. He said, Jay, shut your mouth. He said, you're not going to call your mother on her deathbed trying to make amends and take her death and your guilt, shame, and remorse and turn this situation around and make it about you and your pain, bro. He said, Jay, you're selfish. You're not going to call her. You're going to let her die in peace. And then he said, you're not going to the funeral. You're homeless in the state rehab. You're barely a month sober. You've got nothing positive to bring to a funeral. My sponsor said, you're going to stay put, graduate Maverick in a week, and go back to Crossroads East and graduate that 4.5-month program. And that's what I did. I stayed put, and 22 hours later, my mom died. And I was going to leave and get loaded, and the director came to me and he said, Jay, you don't have to go on an airplane and go to a funeral to honor your mother's life. You can write a eulogy, and we'll gather up everybody and the patients and the staff, and you can honor your mother's life from rehab, the state rehab. It's an ugly crowd over there, being me, the ugliest. And so I didn't know what a eulogy was in 2012, so I just wrote out my mom's life story from the day I met her to the last day I saw her at the airport when I yelled at her. And I read it, we gathered everybody up. I didn't know what a eulogy was in 2012. Back then when people died, I didn't go to funerals, I went to the bar. But anyways, I read her life story and I cried through the whole thing. You couldn't understand a single word that I read. I've never cried so hard in my life. It was the most painful experience I've ever done. Knowing that I was never going to be able to say sorry to my mom for yelling at her, for kicking me out of her house, for stealing from her when she was trying to recover from massive cancer surgery. Literally going into her purse and stealing money, going onto her dresser and taking money. She's sleeping like 20 hours a day. And so anyways, I read the eulogy. And when I got done reading it, there's 30 patients in there and all the staff, and I got done reading my mom's life story. I just cried my guts out. And the director started singing Amazing Grace. And like everyone just kind of fell in and we're all just singing Amazing Grace. A wretch like me and all that. And when we got done singing, I was sitting in my chair and I did this. And I took my first sober hit of ease and comfort, which is what these guys describe that as. And then I had the experience like the day I drove the car. Barely a month sober, homeless in the state rehab. After reading my mom's eulogy, I had the internal experience that I am a good son. Because that's what a good son does when his mother dies. He reads a eulogy. Even apparently if he's homeless in the state rehab. And because I took that action that was suggested to me, I had the experience that I'm a good son. And I haven't drank or done drugs since. And that's been 7.5 years ago. And so I didn't go to my mom's funeral. I'll wrap it up with this. I cried a lot my first couple of years of sobriety because my life came together. A car was given to me when I was 10 months sober. I was driving at 11 months sober. And I was back to myself. That's all my mom wanted from me, to return to the son she'd always known. And I had a lot of guilt, shame, and remorse my first couple of years of sobriety that I didn't go to my mom's funeral. But I have zero guilt, shame, and remorse today, and I have had zero guilt, shame, and remorse for years for not going to my mom's funeral. I wouldn't want to change it because I know the higher purpose in it. And that purpose is I sponsor men who don't go to their mother's funeral. A bunch of them. I sponsor men whose mother or father have died. They were locked up and couldn't go to the funeral, or they showed up to their mother or father's funeral drunk or high, which is not showing up. That's why I didn't go to my mom's funeral. And the only way I've gotten that experience and gotten the healing of not going to my mother's funeral is by helping men heal their guilt, shame, and remorse around their mother or father's death. Sponsoring men. And so you're not here to be a sponsee. It's important to get through the steps. It arms you with the facts about yourself. You're here to be a sponsor. Meeting makers do not make it in recovery. Sponsors do. Because what happens when you sponsor another man? See, I'm qualified to sponsor a man whose life is destroyed today because my life was destroyed for many years. And sober men put my life together, and I owe it to them. Everything in my life is because of recovery and sponsorship. And so when you help a man put his destroyed life together as a sponsor, you get the healing that you need. My sponsor could have never given me the experience of healing over not going to my mother's death with any wisdom that he could have ever told me. The only way that got healed was by going out, getting off my alcoholic, self-centered, drug addict rear end, and helping men put their lives together as a sponsor. In doing that, I got the healing that I need. I was able to put my mother's death in perspective. I was able to put the pain of that in perspective. And I was able to heal from that. And so I've been in a living amends for 7.5 years, and I will be in a living amends until the day I draw my last breath. Because when I made amends to my mother, who had passed, my sponsor acted like my mom. And I said, I'm sorry I stole from you, Mom. I'm sorry I yelled that at you at the airport when you kicked me out of your house. I'm sorry I was stealing from you when you're trying to recover from cancer. I wrote it all out. I said that just to my sponsor. He acted like my mom. We burnt the letter. And then my sponsor said, Jay, now stand up from this picnic table and start acting like the best son on this planet. And how you do that, how you honor your mother, is by treating women with respect. And that's what I started doing. I started acting like a good son. I started acting on the bus. I'd get off the city bus and clean up the bus stop. I started acting like the best dude on the bus. I started acting like the best guy in rehab. I started acting like the best guy standing in line, DMV, trying to get my driver's license. I started acting like a good son, a good friend. And on down the line, I realized oh wow, this isn't an act. It's actually who I am. There's nothing wrong with me. And no matter what problem I call my sponsor with, ultimately, he always gives me the same answer. Jay, there's nothing wrong with you. And more importantly, there's nothing wrong with them. We have a code around here. Love and tolerance is our code. And I have to forgive people for being lost, including myself, because when I got here, I was lost, and recovery, the village of recovery, forgave me for being lost, and they put my life together. So I hope you'll join us. Thank you.